we're finally ready. Oh, let me see. Is that working? No. This is why I wanted to do a test. All right, looks like we're good to go. No, maybe not. I'm going to restart this. All right, how about that? All right, this is why I want to do the test before the October 15th show because of this. This is a mess. Anyway, so hey, everybody, if you're dialed in, really appreciate it. If not, cool. Hopefully you can catch this video some other time. I'm streaming it also to YouTube. So a couple of things about me, and another reason why I wanted to do this test show is to kind of explain why I'm here, what I want to do, what I want to talk about, and hopefully get a lot of feedback and we can learn from each other as we go through this. So first off, I'm an ops guy. I spent the first half of my career doing surveillance. I like to keep things simple. I like to bring information down to the most simplistic and practical, meaningful ways as possible. And so that's one of the reasons I was able to, do a lot of the things I was able to do and work with a lot of really great people, law enforcement and other communities, is just trying to bring down the complexities of law and policy and everything else and get this. Thanks, David. Use some useful information. Sorry, I'm a little shook up because the whole debacle that I had there a minute. So anyways, so today just going to chat about the current C-UAS law, what's going on, what it says, and what it means for everybody out there. But again, as an ops guy, it sucks talking about this stuff, and there's really only one way to talk about law as an ops guy. So I'm going to crack this open. I'm going to have a beer. And we're going to talk about law. David, I wish you were here. You want to jump on? He's not responding. All right, so let's do this. And again, bear with me as I figure this out. I am not a host like David is. He is a pro. All right, so in 2016, the Congress decided, hey, everybody needs to have counter UAS authority. Yeah, relax and have fun. Trying to relax. I'll have more of this. If you have any questions, throw them up there too. And if you have any words of encouragement, that would also help right now. All right, so Department of Energy got their counter UAS authority from Congress. Now, oh, you can't hear me. Who can hear me? Anybody? Can you hear me? All right, I think David can hear me, so we'll roll with that. So in 2016, Congress passed some counter UAS authorities. Try refreshing. All right, folks, I tell you what, I'm going to post the comment here. Oh, Dan's got me. All right. All right. Thanks for the patience, everybody, again. Appreciate it. All right. Looks like y'all can hear me. All right. So, again, 2016. What happened in 2016? Well, drones started dropping bombs on troops in Iraq on a DJI Phantom 3. It was a little grenade, handheld, and that tripped everybody up. Then PETA decided to run a drone into a nuclear power plant in France, if y'all have seen those articles. And then the big one that happened was Gatwick, and I know all y'all are familiar with Gatwick. If you're a drone person, you know what Gatwick is. So Congress decided, hey, we have a problem. We have nuclear facilities anywhere with the any facility with the word nuclear in it needs to be protected. These drones are incredibly difficult to stop, and the law prevents that from happening. And I'm going to dive into why that is here in a minute. So Congress passed the Department of Energy 50 U.S.C. 2661, which you can see up here. And then the big part about this, notwithstanding any provision in Title 18, I'm going to talk about why that's important here a little bit. So one of the things that Congress decided to say, hey, you can't just start shooting drones down without applicable warning. So there is a provision in the law that says you have to warn an operator before you take action. Now, the negotiations started happening between the departments, and the FAA took that responsibility on by putting up airspace restrictions. So anytime you see a 14 CFR 99.7, read the NOTAM language. It will probably say in there that there can be counter UAS action taken against you if you fly in there. Essentially, your drone will be shot down if you enter this without permission. So the warn the operator piece was through airspace restrictions. So if you don't have an airspace restriction and you think that a drone shouldn't be flying over your facility, guess what? It's probably legal. And, you know, that's a big issue that's been going on for quite a while. So one of the other big things that you're going to see in here in all of the counter UAS law, there's 3 of them, is the term covered facility or asset. This is big because these are the things that Congress is saying that those departments or those agencies can actually protect. So what they'll do is they'll go in there and define, hey, covered facility or asset means this to this agency or department or sub-department or whatever. So inside here, you can see this is DOE. And what happened was this was a frantic scramble to get this law passed. It's a single page. This is one of the most simplistic laws I've ever seen in my 23 years of operating UAS and conducting counter UAS policy and strategy and everything else. And this is it. So the terms unmanned aircraft system, which is defined in law again. And this is the whole DOE law. They have a lot of leeway in doing whatever they need to do to protect nuclear facilities and assets, which I think we can all agree is an important thing to have. Yes. So Ed, throw this up there. That's different than the airfields, 100%. I'll dig into that in a minute. While there's technically no legal protection for airports from drones today. So in the exact same year, Congress also gave the DoD authority 10 U.S.C. 130I, and again, gave them these provisions. I'm going to dig into what this all means here more in a little bit. Same thing, warn the operator. That's through the TFR or the airspace restriction, 14 CFR 99.7. However, one of the things that they added in here is this piece right here. The Secretary of Defense shall coordinate with the Secretary of Transportation, in other words, the FAA, and negotiate a process by which the FAA can determine what that effect is on aviation safety. This is what I did in the FAA. This is the office that I managed. This is the processes that we developed. These are the negotiations that we had, and they were very difficult. And, the Department of Defense obviously has very different equities than the Secretary of Transportation. They want to protect their facilities. They want to protect their F-22s. And as a former military guy myself, 100% get it. Absolutely. If there's a drone over your F-22, shoot it down. It shouldn't be there, right? But if you start lobbing 5.56 in the sky, that's a big problem. That can exit out of the protected airspace, if you will, and cause harm to American civilians or anybody else. And that's not good. And so the FAA had to develop these processes and figure out what their safety tolerances were in order to make sure that that safety situation or the counter UAS mitigation technology wasn't worse than the cure. So it's like getting chemo when you have cancer is you're just getting bombarded with radiation. Sometimes the cure is a lot worse than the threat that's out there. So this is what we did, and this is what my team did, it was an incredibly difficult job to do. Again, I'm a little thrown off because of the whole fiasco that I had, so bear with me. The other thing that DoD, DHS, and DOJ has to do is they have to provide semi-annual briefings to Congress in partnership with the Secretary of Transportation. I've sat in on many of these briefings, and these, briefings to the committees and to talk about what they did, what they experienced over that last 6 months, and what they're trying to do to deal with the issue. So I've been seeing a lot of these hearings from Congress saying, it's a big problem. It's this. They've known about this for almost a decade. They know this is going on. They know the problems because they get briefed these problems, and almost all of these are classified briefings as well to bring up classified information on what the drone incursions are, how they're happening, and continued. Again, my nerves are shot. I am a human being, amazingly. So one of the other things the DoD has been pretty upset about for a while now, and it is what it is, I don't really care about this, is the partial termination of the law. So about every 5 years, the law terminates and they have to re-up it. And so that's the argument that the DoD makes, is this hits into, planning for budget funding and what acquisition processes and all of this stuff. To me, it's just a reason they want this law permanent in the books. They don't want to have to be able to re-up it and re-justify that they need this every year. You can make an argument one way or the other. Yes, 100%. DoD always needs this law. They always need to be able to take action against drones over their facilities. But this is also a forcing function for them to be working with Congress and to go back with them and saying, hey, what do you need more? Is there something that you're not doing appropriate in the sense of what Congress wants to see happen? And at the end of the day, Congress is elected by the all of us, and so they're looking out for our well-being and the safety of the nest. So that's incredibly important for them to have to go back to Congress and say, we still need this, and here's why. Now, again, in 130I, this is where it gets really deep, and the difference between DOE's regulations kind of came about. So deep inside the law, again, you got this term, covered facility or asset, and what that those words mean to the DoD based on what Congress said they mean. So one thing to note on this is it doesn't say people. They cannot go out there, DoD, based on law, and I'm not the one saying this. This is the one Congress is the one saying this, is that you cannot go out there and protect your people from drones. That's not what we're telling you can do. What we're telling you can do is you can take action against drones, mitigation, detection, and it's all spelled out and what they think that means, Congress anyways, as long as it fits inside of one of these mission sets. So nuclear deterrence, missile defense, national security space, assistance to the vice president or protection of the president, air defense of the United States, including sovereignty, and blah, 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 blah. Here are the missions. This is where the DoD can execute counter UAS mission. They cannot. I'm an Air Force guy. I love the Air Force golf courses. That is not a protected asset, unfortunately, which, you can argue that that's one of the most important assets the Air Force has right now. And forgive me on my dry sense of humor, but this is it. And so this is one of the things that the DoD has been trying to expand upon for years to increase the level of protection that they can apply to facilities that may not fit under one of these mission sets. So the whole thing in New York, in New Jersey, the drone hysteria, why doesn't the DoD just come in and shoot them down? They legally can't. And here's the law saying why that they cannot do that. So this is the DoD. Now, I'm skipping through those two pretty quick because this is the big one. This is where Congress really dove into this, took their time on the law, and really understood the counter UAS issue from a legal perspective, whether good or bad. We all can be the judge of that on your own. But DOJ and DHS fell into 6 U.S.C. 124N under the same law, and it was highly restrictive versus what DOD and DOE got. So again, notwithstanding these laws, I'll tell you in a minute what all that means. Warn the operator. So again, airspace restrictions. Here's one big, massive difference: research, testing, training, and evaluation. Nothing in the DOD or DOE law references research, testing, training, and evaluation. So what the discussion was, at least when I was a Fed, was that the DOD could conduct those activities at their own will because they were testing and training, within secured areas, which they typically do within special use airspace, and develop this technology on their own, and without coordinating with the FAA to some certain degree, so long as that they didn't create aviation safety. And then there was an argument on who determines what aviation safety means. Anyways, the point is that the DoD and DOE typically did not coordinate research, testing, and training efforts with the FAA because this provision was not in their law. DHS had a very different situation, obviously, and DOJ, as you can see. So they did have to coordinate all their research, testing, and training and evaluation. This was very unique because the office that I was part of, we got to see all the testing and training that went on nationally that DHS and all them were doing. And it was phenomenal work. I have to give credit to Sean McDonald, who is no longer at DHS S&T. It's an incredibly a blow to DHS S&T, in my opinion, that he left, because he was such a force in developing outstanding technology within DHS S&T, and then trying to, promote those technologies out to CBP, the Coast Guard, and a lot of these other sub agencies that benefited from the work that DHS S&T did. So if you did testing within the S&T framework, good on you. The information is all there. Whether your stuff worked or not is definitely known in that shop as well. Now, this coordination clause is also very different. If you look within the DoD and the DOE, it typically says consult with the FAA rather than coordinate with the FAA. And again, as an ops guy, those two words are meaningless to me. I don't really give a shit if it's consult or coordinate. However, apparently the lawyers, that's a very big deal between consult and coordinate. I don't really know what it was. However, coordinate is stronger than consult. If you're a lawyer and you want to throw that up in the chat on why that's a big deal, please do. But it never made sense to me. But it's there. So now we know DHS and DOJ have to coordinate. DOD, maybe coordinate, maybe consult. I guess now that I'm just thinking about it, maybe consult is like, hey, we're going to go do this. We consulted with you and have a nice day. Coordinate is a lot more process oriented and intensive, even though the processes for coordinating all of these activities were the same, regardless of the department that we were working with. Now, again, DOE's was 1 page. This is, I don't know, what is that? 6 pages of law. That's how deep they went. Now, skipping ahead on a lot of this, again, semi-annual briefing every single time, every 6 months or so that happen. Here's content, notification. I don't even remember what that is, so don't even worry about it. All right, now here's one of the things that's been tried to figure out for quite a while is how do we get SLTT, state, local, tribal, territorial law enforcement entities, the ability to protect their own mass gathering sites, whatever their equities are for their specific jurisdictions for counter UAS. There's been many times through National Security Council working groups, through DOD, DHS, it doesn't matter what it is. They've explored this over and over and over again to try and figure out how to get the law enforcement under the veil of 124N to give them that legal authority to do so. I can't tell you how many times I've had to point back to this provision, and it says within the scope of their authority, do not exercise authority granted to the Secretary and the Attorney General. This one sentence stops all delegation of counter UAS authority to local law enforcement, period, dot. It says that they can support those activities, and typically they did. A good friend of mine, Tom Adams, who's now with Drone Shield, retired FBI, did exactly this. He would go to these mass events, provide that federal protection, and leverage local law enforcement, typically to make contact with operators that they would find based on their detection equipment. However, they were never able to operate any of the detection gear or any of the mitigation equipment. It was flat out explicitly illegal. That's been the problem. And this is what I know people like DJ Smith in Virginia State Police and Charles Werner and a lot of the really good advocates for local law enforcement have been pushing for, is some type of local counter UAS authority. There's a new bill out, and my first official podcast, and I promise you it'll be way better than this disaster. October 15th, I'm going to dive into that specific law, what it says, and kind of talk about what that means for local law enforcement, airports, the AIP program, and a lot of these other entities. So October 15th is going to be that show. Again, it'll be much better. I'll have a solid buzz on beer, so I'll be a little bit more articulate, oddly enough. So again, dropping into the definitions here, covered facility and asset. There you go again. And again, the reason why I'm hitting on this so much is because there's a change in the new law that will be passed. It went through committees, 3 committees, Judiciary, Homeland Security, and Transportation and Infrastructure, and it passed 60-0 just, I believe it was 2 weeks ago. And they're trying to figure out a vehicle to get that standalone bill passed, which I'm assuming it'll get passed through by the end of this year. So there will be new counter UAS authorities coming out. However, in the meantime, again, covered facility and asset. This is where Congress defines what each department can or cannot do, but they went to the 10th degree, whatever, on specific proponents inside of DHS and DOJ. So they said within DHS, you can read here, Customs and Border Protection, this is what you can do for counter UAS, including security and protecting facilities, aircraft vessels, whether moored or underway. That's it. They can't do anything else. And if they do, they technically fall outside of what 124N allows them to do. Secret Service has broad authorities to do pretty much anything they want, so long as it's protection of the president, and they have so many other legal authorities that protect them from doing those things. This provision right here, protection of facilities pursuant to 40.13.15, is really unique because the organization that actually executes this provisional authority is the Force Protection Service, FPS, but they're not mentioned in 124N. So it's a really weird loophole, caveat, whatever you want to call it, that gives FPS counter UAS authority to protect federal facilities, but it doesn't actually mention FPS. It's a weird nuance. Again, when you start to become versed in some of this law, you can kind of see some of the gaps and the failings that happened when these laws were being drafted. And so, again, I'll dig into more of the new law, and I'll point some of these things out there as well. Within DOJ, of course, you got FBI. FBI has broad authority. However, it's got to be in support of an investigation or national security rated event. And they specifically address national security events here down below. You have the Marshal Service of Federal Juris. So USMS, fantastic people. This is typically in the movement of prisoners, high value people, El Chapo, or any of this other stuff. They have some counter UAS authority to protect a lot of people. However, they're very quiet about executing this authority, rightfully so, because a lot of what they do is in protection of people who are at threat. And so this one's been a really interesting process or policy that we had to negotiate with the marshals in order to get them stood up and operating. One of my favorite folks of all time is Todd Craig, Bureau of Prisons, retired. And he ran a massive counter UAS testing objective at Terre Haute, Indiana, many years ago. And he was with Federal Bureau of Prisons, and they put that equipment through the paces. He was less than impressed by some of the technology that was out there. And so hopefully you learn from Mr. Todd Craig. And if he's out there, you should definitely bring Todd in, because he's probably one of the smartest people on counter UAS, specifically for prison operations and implementation that I know. So Bureau of Prisons, again, this is federal. This is a massive, massive problem from my perspective, is state and county prisons are not covered. If you want to talk about a massive drone threat problem, it's the state and local prisons. I heard David was telling me that from This Week in Drones was telling me a story. I think, David, correct me if I'm wrong, it was from South Carolina. But the warden or the head of, perimeter security or whatever was saying that his prison was a damn drone airport. That's how much activity he had flying over his drones. So following that conversation I had with David and hearing the story is when I wrote up the self-defense, draft policy that folks could to take and leverage. And I'm happy to share that with anybody who was trying to build policy on self-defense. So that exists. But again, Todd Craig, fantastic human being. Reach out to him if you're having trouble in your prison. DHS and DOJ actively support all NNSEs through what's called the Special Event Assessment Rating, or SEER rating. And that, which is not discussed in here, is all coordinated with what's called the CWIG, or the Counter UAS Working Group. This is all of the federal agencies get together and they lay out what special events there are for any particular time frame. So that'd be the Super Bowl, World Series, Formula One, NASCAR events, et cetera, and saying who has the resources or the assets to go cover this event from a counter UAS perspective. This is where the resource problem gets stretched super, super thin. I know the person in the FBI who's currently running the counter UAS office. I'm not going to drop his name because he is still a federal agent. But his funding is terrible. He's barely got enough money to cover the events that he can. And this guy's on the road probably 250 days a year, and his team. And so hats off to him. But there's only one team in the FBI that covers NNSEs. So again, when it comes down to what's important, it's money, appropriations. Congress has to fund these things so that they can protect the people they can protect. And at the end of the day, if something bad happens to them, the FBI and a lot of these other federal agencies are doing everything that they absolutely can to provide this protection. So it was very disheartening seeing some of the New Jersey stuff happen and the federal agencies getting the amount of flack that they did, because they were doing everything that they possibly could within the confines of the law and within the amount of money that they had granted to them by Congress. And so it's a shame sometimes. Now, again, protection of active law enforcement stuff. Yeah, that's a given. So for whatever reason, they come down here and they bring up the Coast Guard again. I don't know why, but again, it's one of those weird nuances when you start reading laws and you're really digging into actual language, how they structure some of this stuff. And it's almost like they forgot something and then threw it in, and it's kind of comical. So again, I apologize for kind of the mess of some of this. Don't worry about any of that. This is my first time going around, and usually I have David to host and bring some structure to the podcast. But I hope the information is useful. I am cutting this very quick and short because I'm afraid. So we will reconvene on October 8th or 15th. And what I'll do is I'll talk about the new law that is coming, what it means, what you can do from a business development perspective. There's a lot of opportunity inside of that counter UAS law, especially at airports. So who is it bringing up airports? There is no, again, counter UAS protection for airports right now. It doesn't exist. And so that's one of the things they are trying to address in this new law or bill that they're trying to become law. However, one of the really unique things about that, while I'm on the topic, is that they're not doing it through TSA. They're doing it through the FAA, which is really unique and strange. I'll dive into that more. But if you are an airport authority or if you work with airports, in the 2024 FAA Reauthorization Act, there is a provision buried in that law that allows the funding of drone detection and mitigation equipment through the Airport Improvement Program, or AIP. AIP is a federal trust fund to help municipal airports fund improvement projects. And so if you are looking to purchase detection and mitigation equipment, even though you may not legally be able to use it, there is a funding pathway, oddly enough. Again, it's one of those gaps that's a little bit broken, and I think that they're going to tie up with this new bill. So thanks for bearing with me today. The next one will be a lot better. I really appreciate your time. This will be on YouTube if you want to come back. Hit me up on LinkedIn, message me if you want to talk about any topics. I'll probably do a lot better if there's somebody here with me and not doing this solo. So take it easy. Appreciate it.